Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Hi, this is Ed Cohen in San Diego, California, and you're on Global TV Talk Show. This is a business unit of globalbusinessnews.net. Mim, welcome. Stephen, welcome. Stephen?
Thank you very much. And this is our Thrive-XL show. So Thrive is all about workplace well-being and what we can do as leaders to increase leadership well-being and workplace wellness. And our guest today is Mim Senft, who's the president and CEO of her own company, Motivity. Sorry, I get that right, Motivity Partnerships. But most importantly, we've invited her on today to talk about global women for well-being. So welcome, Mim.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here.
Global Women for Well-Being. Now that's a mouthful, but it's easy to understand. So does this mean they do more from the sidelines or out in front?
So I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think with any of the health and well-being issues and particularly when we're talking about gender, there is the internal work that needs to get done, but then there's also more of the social aspect, social norms, cultural norms that impact gender-specific health and well-being issues.
Stephen.
So coming out of the pandemic, Mim, what do you see, or do you see a increased focus on workplace wellness, and how's that going to impact women in the workplace?
Really, really good question. I think some of the stats, at least in the United States, we know that as of February, 3 million women had left the workforce for different reasons. And the major impact, as most people could guess, would be women in hospitality, women of diverse backgrounds, particularly Black women. But the third category is executive women. And I don't know that everybody fully understands why that's happening.
I got a question.
Sure.
If I may just jump in here. When you say leave the workforce, does that mean that they're not starting their own business from your view there? Because a lot of women have started their own business because they don't want to work for the man, or work for a jerk. It doesn't matter what sex they are.
Well, that's an interesting question. So there is definitely a movement. And again, in Global Women for Wellbeing, we have a really interesting perspective because we have corporate leadership, we have entrepreneurial leadership, we have researchers, we have community leaders. So we get kind of a multi-dimensional view of this. The biggest issue that came out of the past 18 months and COVID, and it's true not just in the United States, is this huge issue around caregiving. And some of these women, plus you had, unfortunately, in some cases, depending on where you are in the world, if you didn't have anywhere to put your children and they are school age, you are now on top of everything else being a teacher. And there is no place to put them. And so this whole blending thing got more and more difficult. And if you then layer on top of that, if you have any aging parents or aging, just aging people that friends, family, all of this got more and more exacerbated. And so there was just a point that got reached by many of these women that said, we just can't do it. The other thing that I don't think we think about when we talk about pay equity, right? If you've got two partners in a household, if you're lucky to have that, and you have two partners in a household, and somebody has to stay home with the kids, I mean, the logical choice is to pick the person to stay in the workforce that brings in the most money. So now we got a double whammy. If we don't have pay equity, right, where are those decisions going to go when we get into these kinds of situations?
So is there a tug of war going on, Stephen? Is there a tug of war?
I don't think so much a tug of war is just a misunderstanding of what's happening here. As Mim said, I'm the thing about women executives leaving, I mean, that's surprising. It's shocking. But I understand it. But I don't think corporations really have a finger on the pulse of it right now. What do you think, Mim?
Yeah, I think that this is such an opportunity right now. I always look at challenge and crisis as saying, well, here's the problem right now, but what can we do from here? What can we learn from what we're seeing right now? And we knew that caregiving was a huge piece of the puzzle many years ago. This is not a new discussion. And in fact, the white paper that's research-based that GW4W, Global Women for Wellbeing, put out in 2018 underscored this issue. And this whole experience over the past 18 months has now underscored this about 30 times in my mind. You can't get any more clear about why this needs to be addressed and how we have to get more creative, and why leaders in organizations, if you want to hold on to your best female talent, then organizations really need to be thinking about equitable treatment versus what we normally see as equal treatment. Well, we treat everybody the same, but that becomes very problematic. And this even bleeds into the diversity and inclusion issue, right? So if I have employees, and again, we've had the great privilege and honor to learn from so many people from so many different backgrounds, just touch so many lives. I know people that lost 9 family members over the past 18 months, 9. Now, to think that, yeah,
that's awful.
It is, but it's a reality. And so how do we have these discussions? And who was the primary caregiver in many cases? Who arranged the funeral? Who got all the family together? Who did all of these pieces of the puzzle? This all goes to caregiving. And who is the primary person? Which I think bleeds into this discussion. And we've done workshops, and I'm going to tell you, I think this is a very valuable discussion for organizations to be having. When you hear family man versus working mother, what does that bring up for you? And there's no right or wrong answer here, but it gets to some of the deeply ingrained ways that we view what we value in traditional roles, and how this starts to play out in the workplace. A working mother can be a CEO, a working mother can be a shift leader, a working mother can be, in any position, correct? I mean, just like a family man can be. But the perception of what they do and how they do it, there's just great data around this. You'll see that when a male executive, and there's real data, a male executive goes to their child's baseball game, takes time off. What a great dad. He made time to do this. This is awesome.
I think you've got an idea here for a sitcom. With that title, that would be, I think, a big hit. And we could probably get a diaper manufacturer to be a sponsor.
Right. Well, hopefully more than that, right? I would hope that there would be some senior executives that would go, gee, maybe we can start to change the conversation. But I think even your statement around this is really, really important, because what are the visual images we all grew up with? This isn't just about like what we see in the work, but one of the things that we know is that you process visual images at 60,000 times faster than what you hear. So all through our growing up years, and for any of us that are a little older, right, we had very specific role models around what men and women were supposed to be. John Wayne, I mean, I know these are, but they're classic. Here's what a male leader looks like, and here's what we value with women in a relationship, and father knows best, and like I'm going way back. But then you get into, I've even had discussions around like the King of Queens. So the chubby, goofy, and he's a great actor. I'm not denigrating him in any way, shape, or form. It has nothing to do with, the writing is great on the show and all of that. But think of the visual image. If would you ever see the reverse of that? Would you see, right, the real fit looking younger guy marrying to a more rounded, whatever you want to put this? But the images that we continue to see over and over and over again in media, in print, now in social media, are still in many cases reinforcing millennial old cultural norms. And so, we're very careful about saying, look, this isn't anybody's fault, right? I mean, we all inherited this, and we all have bias. I don't care who you are. We all do, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's recognizing and getting more curious as to why we react this way, why we think a word is masculine or feminine, why we value a leadership skill, or even think that it is one way or the other. Yeah.
That's still propagated today. I was going to say that's still being propagated today, Mim. This is just not our generation, because I heard it's a great research done in the United Kingdom, probably like 4 years ago, so maybe 2017, maybe 2018. They had third graders draw pictures of an astronaut, a police officer, and a fire personnel. Mm-hmm. And even the girls, 98% of them, all three were depicted as male. And then they brought into the classroom a female astronaut, a female police officer, and a female firefighter. And it just opened up their eyes, and it was just amazing. But we still propagate these images today.
We do. We do. And again, it's I'm not about finger pointing or blaming, because I don't think that it ultimately solves the issue. And I also think that the other side of this is that this is about across the gender arc. It's about true gender bridge building, so that in the context of a working environment, everybody is contributing. Everybody is being heard. And look, you go back to Harvard Business Review, Gallup data, PwC. I mean, you can go down the list like of all the research that talks about why truly what we always like to refer to as intentionally integrated teams. So not just, hey, we have all these people from different backgrounds, but do we know if they all truly have voice? Do we know if they can all contribute in a meaningful way? And can we hear them and respect what they have to say, even if their opinion is different than our own?
So I have to ask, I don't mean to be flippant or
no.
just look for airtime here, but while you were talking about all this, I've talked about, okay, here we are, it's 2021 and a half already. And I think back to Archie Bunker days. Okay. Now that's not the workplace for today, but let's just say, but I'm stuck on the sitcom idea, but let's just say there's a TV show out there with the same kind of characters, but it's not Archie Bunker, it's Arlene Bunker. All right. Who's the breadwinner, because who knows where her husband is, but they still have those attitudes. Arlene is Archie, but now female. And so what you guys were just talking about is like knowledge workers and, people making low six figures probably. But what about everybody else?
Right. Well, it impacts, it impacts, and I think that's a really, really good point. And it is, I will be very upfront here, GW4W as an organization, our youngest member is 15 years old. Our oldest member is 84. And so we have very high-powered, both male and female leadership from multiple backgrounds, because we work very hard at that. But we also, to your point, wanted to make sure that it was accessible for people at all levels, because leadership is not just about at the top of an organization. Leadership is about how do I lead in my own life, for myself, for my own health and well-being? How do I have safe boundaries and healthy boundaries for myself? How do I have it for my family, in my community, in my, shift work, whatever it is, whether, I'm working in a coffee shop and I'm working with 6 or 7 other people and, other baristas. Leadership isn't just about at the top. And so if we really want to see a meaningful change, a positive change, I think has to be part of this conversation, because truthfully, does somebody that is working on a cleaning shift, I'm just giving you an example, right? That they shift to people that goes in and cleans offices, right? Why would that woman want to get paid any less than her male counterpart? Is that different than the CEO that wants to get paid the same? Or are we really talking about the same kinds of issues? So I think that it's a really good point in that we need to have more open conversation, not just about leadership at the top in organizations, but about how it works the whole way down the chain, and how managers, and particularly new leadership, new managers, are trained in creating more intentional inclusion, are given the opportunity to explore their own bias. Not just about how do we do budget projections and, and again, all that stuff's important. Don't get me wrong. Same kind of background, but I also think it's an imperative for the bottom line. If you want these integrated teams where it's been proven that you then end up having much more resilience through crisis and change, you have faster creative problem solving that happens within that team, and you tend to have better innovation because you have multiple viewpoints coming in quickly and you can pivot and move forward. So the business case for this is so incredibly important. So why is that important for women? Well, women make up potentially more than half of the potential global workforce. That's more than 50%. Like, so when we talk about diversity, and now again, there's different segments obviously underneath that, but this is why this is so important. If we're actually designing work that minimizes what more than 50% of our potential workforce can bring to the table, then we all lose.
So it's really a leadership issue, not just an organizational issue. And what I'm afraid of is that organizations will throw money at it and say, okay, well, we have childcare services. Okay, let's have elderly care services. So, if you don't have children, you can now qualify. We'll give you some money to hire some people to look after your elderly folks. And they're going to take a monetary approach to this rather than a caring approach to this. Are you afraid of the same issue? And
it's already, this has been happening. There are, and again, I've been working on workplace design and with all kinds of the benefits underwriting background. Like, there are providers for some of these services. Now, again, that's very US centric when you think about this, right?
Yes.
Right. There are other countries that have very different policies around maternity leave. And I do think you're going to start to see this when we're talking about elder care, because we have aging workforces around the world. This is going to, we keep talking about this gray tsunami coming down the path. We're already there in many cases. And so I think you're 100% right. And again, it's always about strategically, what do our demographics look like in our organization? Do we know if we have a lot of caregivers? I will tell you that because there's bias around this, it's sometimes really hard to figure out if you actually do have a higher percentage. But on average, at least 25% of the workforce in the United States right now is being impacted by caregiving in one way or another. And actually, I think that's low. Yeah. Well, but the average worker, 25% of our workforce in the United States is 55 or older. 25%. So do they have aging parents?
Yes.
Right, exactly. Or do they still need to work? Yes.
Absolutely.
And so one other stat I'm going to throw out there for you for the why is this such an important thing for business leaders to be thinking about? On average, a caregiver for an aging person in their life spends about 22 hours a week working on caregiving, administration, coordinating, doing all. So think about that worker and the difference between somebody that isn't a caregiver. And if that person is key to your organization, a rainmaker, an innovator, whatever they are, that's why it's really important. What can you put in place so that you can relieve some of that burden for them so they can continue to be contributing to your organization?
Well, I can testify to that. I was the primary caregiver for my father in the last few years of his life, and 22 hours a week, that's actually on the short side, quite frankly. That's only 3 hours a day. It actually was a lot more. Go ahead, Ed.
Sorry, I'm choking here. But people, let's talk about people coming back to the office or not. Okay.
Mhm.
And like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, pinnacles of Wall Street, they say, you better come back or you're not getting paid.
Mhm.
And then others are put out a policy, oh, you can work 2 days a week here, or 3 days, or whatever. And then they change it when
Mhm.
there's pushback, right? And so what's going on here, especially with your organization, GW 4W. So that's like front and center right now.
I absolutely love that you brought this up because this has been huge discussion with a lot of the leaders. And again, as I said, like we are very privileged because we get to talk to, but those are both financial firms. So I think that's really interesting to point out. Look at the tech firms. What are the tech firms doing? What is Xylo doing? What is Viacom CBS doing? What is right? It's not just like because, the press tends to focus on, right, they're the big heavy hitters. You're going to open up the Wall Street Journal. So yes, I think they're still trying to go back to this old model, control, control, control. This is the way we've always done it. This is what made us financially successful. Okay. At least in the world that I'm in and the people that are collecting data, senior global HR executives that I get to speak with, there is a shift happening. And there's a couple things that I don't think, there's a fear factor of change, right? For any organization. Oh my gosh, we've done so well. We've always been this good. Why would we change now? Like, we're just going to continue to do what we've been doing. Xylo, on the other hand, there was a great article by their leadership, and I think it came out last summer, where they had been adamantly against people working from home. And they said publicly, we were wrong. We are just as productive as we were 6 months ago, if not more. This is amazing. And so why were we so stuck in this model? Why wouldn't we give people the option? But again, it's never, I always say this about worksite wellness. You have to figure out what your culture is and really understand it. You have to understand that not everybody is an extrovert, not everybody is an introvert, not everybody is a caregiver, or not everybody's single, or not everybody. It's typically more complex. And the problem with a lot of workforces, and again, because again, I keep saying we make up 50% of the potential workforce. There's too little discussion about taking this time to build real strategy. Who is in my workforce? Where are they geographically? Are we missing out on talent? Like, if we open this up differently, can we potentially pull in talent that we didn't have access to before?
Right. Global talent. Right.
Global talent. Or even, I've heard this from friends in San Francisco. I don't want to live in a little tiny apartment in San Francisco anymore. I want to live in Colorado because I love to ski and I love to hike. I still want my job. I still want to do that, but I want a better quality of life for myself. I don't want to be stuck in this little 600 square foot apartment and for $1 bazillion. Or the other thing that I've heard a lot of is all those people that were commuting into these big cities. So you want me to come back? Well, I now know the difference. I've now gotten, in some cases, seriously, San Francisco, New York. I mean, some of these people were commuting almost 2 hours each way a day in order to make that paycheck. And so there is a pretty big shift. This isn't just millennials, of talented people saying, my life is a little bit more valuable. If you want me, I need a little bit more flexibility. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm going to move on. And look, anybody has to look at the data from, I think it was in April. More people resigned from their jobs in April than any other time in the past decade for a reason. And so it gets back to, okay, all you companies that think we're just going to go back and do same old, you may find that you're going to lose out on talent, that you're going to have people that will say, I would rather work for this organization because they're willing to acknowledge my humanness, both in and outside. I will give you 100% of my knowledge, my connection to the purpose in the company, as long as I also have a life outside of it. So the 95 hours a week, some of this, and I worked on Wall Street, I know,
Yeah.
been there, done that. I will never do it again. I mean, I can say this personally. Life is too precious, and I'm a hard worker. I'm an A personality. I built, my own consulting firm. Like, this isn't like, I'm just like, woohoo, I'm going to, run off and go hiking every day, as much as I like to do that. But I think that there is this, again, I go back to, what talent do you think you're going to need moving forward? How are you going to attract it? What are we hearing from the younger millennials and now Gen Z, because they now make about, I think it's about 5% of our workforce now. And how can we start to look at this differently? So intergenerational workforces, much more focus on how we tap into that power of diversity and inclusion to keep our competitive edge. And the cautionary tale for me has always been, I lived in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, I went to high school in that area. And Bethlehem Steel was the #1 steel manufacturer in the world at one point. I mean, they were the powerhouses. And they never really changed their way of doing things. And they got beat out by the Japanese and like other countries because they weren't willing to innovate. They weren't willing to, well, why should we? We make so much money. Blockbuster is another great example. Yay, who didn't go to Blockbuster, right, at some point? And I bet they were wishing they were Netflix, who really pivoted quickly. And so it gets to, why were those companies able to do that?
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a timely announcement.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we're researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
We had a guest on yesterday from Hartford area, and he was a HR leader of a company, and he was saying that it's really difficult right now to be the CEO whisperer because CEOs trying to figure out how to pay the bills, and they've got all this empty space that they're paying for, and they're taking out desks and redesigning into several conference rooms of different sizes in the same space. And people will come in to have a meeting in person and then leave.
Mhm.
And they can also reserve like a hotel desk, for a period of time or days or whatever. But nobody's in the office very much other than some leaders.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you're hearing things all over. Now, I number of years ago was involved with the Well Building Standard, Delos, and was a consultant to them around. And I'm very fascinated by space. And I think now, right, how important is what is the health of your space? How does the health of the built space impact the health and well-being and innovation of your employees?
Yeah.
It's a great, great discussion, and now is a great time to have it. I want to shout out to HOK. I know a lot of the leadership there and some of the organizations that are really starting to rethink this. So there's two things, and I think it's really important. I think it's really interesting you brought this up. You're right. CEOs are going, well, if I don't need as much physical space, there's a cost savings there, which I know anybody in commercial real estate is now going, what do we do on our side, right? But this is what happens in seismic shifts. And I do think, and I think we're still in the middle of all of this. I think, to revisit this 5 years from now is going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
But those that are forward thinking, like just what you shared, what a great thing. And again, why aren't you asking your employees? There's going to be a group that's going to be very, very extroverted. That's like, oh my gosh, I just want to be with people and this is killing me. How do we do that? You get the introverts that might've been, and again, I'm going to be a little bit, could be your tech people, some marketing people that do your artwork, there's different, right? But for them, being able to work from home in a quiet environment like this, suddenly they're much more productive. And so again, it's like
at 10 o'clock at night. Not at 4 o'clock.
Right. Why should you? Right. If I like to get up at 6 and my most productive time is between 6 and 10, and then I want to take a break for an hour. And this is the other, I think, shift that I hope, and we're not there yet. How do leaders start to think about recognizing and rewarding productivity versus busyness? That's a big thing. We still have this, and again, it's just our own bias because we grew up this way. If I physically see somebody in a seat, I magically think they're working. Well, we know that's not the case. Again, it's just a perception of. And so I think that's another place to get more creative. How are we measuring and rewarding productivity? Do we really care when that thing gets done? As long as it's hitting a deadline, like time of day, does it really make a difference? I'll tell you, there's a tech security friend of mine, and she used to do all the security for Caesars, and now she's at a global organization. So she's runs a global team. She doesn't answer emails until after 5 o'clock every day. Imagine. Doesn't answer any emails until, I'm going to say it again because I think people are like, what? She also has a rule in the organization that if you don't give their team a project or, a project request or whatever by Wednesday afternoon, you will not get anything until Monday. She has spaced, they are very productive. They hit their numbers. They're doing incredibly well. And I'm just saying that's never one size fits all, but it's those kinds of examples that I hold up and go, sometimes, again, we think that just, I'm busy all the time, the badge of busyness, I like to call it. I'm going to send out emails on a Saturday night because look how hard I'm working. And oh my gosh, except that productivity data that's been around for more than 100 years does not support that in any way. I can't underscore this enough, but it is amazing to me that so many leaders still reward 60, 70, 80 hours, where all the productivity data tells us more mistakes, more turnover, more burnout. And so I think, again, what are you thinking about today so that you can keep that competitive edge and keep your talent?
Good point, Stephen.
Absolutely correct. What's also interesting is I've been reading some research, and to see if Mim has the same feeling here, that people working from home, even women, actually feel their wellness scores have gone up working from home than working in the, and so look, if you're more productive and your wellness, your overall wellness, and part of that, of course, is your relationship with your family and time spent with your children and everything else. If that's going up, why would you want to go back to the workplace?
But it wasn't that way in April of 2020 when all of a sudden people were forced into that.
No, it took a while, but people adjusted, people adapted, and people are good at adapting. And what's going to be interesting, quite frankly, I think, is, when leaders think about the cost of all this, if they take into consideration what they're paying for medical insurance premiums, if they have a healthier, more thriving workforce, partly working from home, their premiums are going to go down, but they're not thinking about that.
Right. No, well, and again, I want to be very cautionary about that, because workplace wellness for years and years, when we started, or the industry, not just me, this is way before my time, but I mean, workplace wellness, I always go back to National Wellness Institute putting out their, the 6 aspects of workplace wellness in 1979, spiritual aspect, financial aspect, connection to, like all the stuff that we're, and everybody goes, oh, it's so new. It's like, no, it's not new. But some of the voices in that arena that I really respect, like Dr. D. Eddington, or Ron Getzel, and, when he published Dr. Joel Bennett, I'll go down the list of like Dr. Jessica Grossmeyer, like people who really do study this stuff. It makes a huge difference. And I think that this is still the biggest miss. Do you truly want thriving in your workplace? Because I think that thriving and resilience for me are much better from a business perspective than thinking about, well, what's it going to cost us, down here? Because, and I'm not going to say who it was. So I got hired to do a strategy specific to a fairly big global company. Spent a lot of time with them. We went through benefits spend, different kinds, what's trending over the past 5 years, your turnover rates, who's turning over, where are they what departments, like all of the nuts and bolts that I think make a lot of sense that most companies don't correlate. Mental health, how much access do people have? Do they even know when and how to get to it? How are your managers trained around all this? What does it say in the handbook? What is policy versus what's actually happening in the culture? All of that is due diligence. So even doing all of that, even building this beautiful strategy and breaking it down, here's kind of the 5-year game plan. It takes 5 years to bend your benefits trend. 5, if you do everything right. So I can't underscore this enough. I prefer, when we look at this and you're doing measurement, is to look specifically at your turnover rates and put a cost around that. Who is leaving and how much is that costing you? And then, are you attracting equivalent or better talent on the other side? If you are spending, and almost all our organization, how much money are you spending on benefits, right? Or total rewards? I think that's even a better way of looking at it. Everything that has the arms around your employees that's supposed to make the workforce more enticing for them to come and join your company, that is supposed to help them relieve some of the other burdens so that they can be focused. How many organizations actually do a gap analysis around this? Like, here we're spending money on X, Y, and Z. Okay, are we getting any benefit for this? Like, is there a real return? And I am a return on investment girl. I really am. I think if there is no CEO or CFO in this country, that we can't make money, I can't pay salaries, we don't have a business. So all the fluffy stuff, if it sounds fluffy, just doesn't resonate. So I really do go for the business case around this. Over time, and I will publicly call out the Breakers. I've had them on panels, and I know their team really, really well. This is the Breakers in Palm Beach. Hospitality. I think they have about 2,500 employees, all different backgrounds. So people that are Spanish speaking only, doing laundry, all the way up to people that handle VIPs and very expensive things. They are a great case study in how you actually change this. They did bend their benefits trend. But Denise will tell you, their senior VP of HR, it took them 6 years. And this is the reality about, I think most companies don't want to embrace. They want a magic pill. They want a magic platform. They want one lunch and learn, or we're going to do biometric screenings again. I'm not a fan. I'll tell you. Because they spend so much money on these things. And my question is, great. So the vast majority of people who went through your biometric screening, can you prove that then turned into long-term positive behavior change?
Let me ask you an off-the-wall question here. Let's talk about leadership in a multicultural environment in one location. Baseball teams today. You got people from Japan and Korea and Blacks and Hispanics from the Dominican and Mexico. How do they, and they're all well paid. Okay. And so how do, I don't know, but I'm looking at the San Diego Padres, for instance. I mean, they're in any team, but how do they manage all that stuff and communicate?
Well, I'm going to say first and foremost, remember, these are the elites of the elites. So I think the one advantage when you're talking about professional sports and not just baseball, like, again, you can use this analogy and, almost, and I use this a lot. So here's what I'm going to say about this. Great thing to bring up. We always love to use sports analogies all the time in the workplace. We're a team, we're going to get it, over to the finish line, you think about all that. But my question always to organizations is, okay, what do great sports teams have in place? What did they do to create a team that is that successful? And, it's everything from, they study a game, all the different plays, right? There's a playbook. So everybody on the team knows that. Like, you go through training to understand. That's why you go to camp, right? To learn it and to practice it and to do that. Nobody just throws you something and says, okay, go out and do it, and nobody talks. So there's time to work out kinks. Each one of those elite players has different types of coaches. So it's not a one size fits all approach. And this is why I'm a big fan of really good, like, health coaching, executive coaching throughout your career. You may not need it a lot, but I think for any aspiring leader, it's one of the one things that I would highly recommend you think about doing, or thinking about building it into your workforce, so that different types of leaders get the kind of coaching that they need to really be at that elite level. And we very rarely do that in organizations. So I think that's the other thing. They have seasons. They don't play 365 days a year. They don't.
No.
They have time off. They study it. We're going to get better. We're going to get different team members. We're going to go through that. They also get sleep. They also get good nutrition. They also are hydrated. I mean, basic health and well-being things that we talk about. The support, somebody gets hurt on the field. What happens? The game stops. There are experts that go out quickly and analyze whether or not, what has to happen. And there's somebody to back them up. They actually have a second string. So if you really want to think about this, so yes, there's the diversity and inclusion side of this, but if whether my skin is black or white, I'm Hispanic, I have Christian beliefs, Muslim, atheist, whatever it is, right? If I'm getting what I need to be at my best, my fellow teammates are all going to be connected to that sense of purpose. I got what I needed, so I can get on the field and be part of this team so that we can go and win. And I think if we truly build cultures this way, and it gets to all of the pieces of the puzzle, do I have an aging workforce? Do I really have to focus on that? Do I have a high percentage of female employees between 25 and 35? Do we have to focus on fertility issues and what that really means for them? Do we, do we need to examine, just like we do for workers' comp, right? How many mistakes are really getting made and what is that costing us? And in what teams? Are we communicating in a way that we need to? And, it is complex. I always say it's like heart surgery. If anybody came to you and said, hey, I have a much better way of doing heart surgery. You come in, I can take care of your heart problem. We can do the surgery in 15 minutes. There is literally nobody that would say, oh yeah, that's where I'm going to go. And yet we want to lunch and learn or some random platform or a program to do this seismic shift in the organization. And I think that the companies that have done this well are ones that are willing to measure their baseline, just like you do for anything else, set goals, understand what's worked or not worked in others, and then apply it to your own culture. And they measure it. And there are great examples of this, of companies that have absolutely hit it out of the ballpark. And then there are those that get awards for not really doing it. Yeah. And then there are those that don't pay attention at all.
This has been great.
Also, Ed, sports athletes only work 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, they're focusing on developing their skills and practicing their skills. So maybe instead of a 4-day work week, we need a 3-hour a day work week.
Well, I also think but that gets back to the productivity.
Exactly.
Question, right? So do we understand neurophysiology? This thing up here has been built over a long time to do specific things and work optimally. And the sports world focuses very clearly on that. We do not do that in the business world. So I think the number now is that on average, your average office worker gets between 140 and 160 emails every day, and then answers about 40 of them. Now, we're not even talking about personal texts and all this. So this information overload, and that every time you go away from a project and answer an email or read an email, it takes your brain anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds, every single one, to get back into that project. So you start to add up that time and you wonder why it doesn't work. And it's just an example of that. It's what I like. Well, Bridget Schulte, she wrote this great book called Overwhelmed, and she uses this term time confetti.
Cool.
And I think about, for those of us that were older, and when I started my career, I got mail on my desk. I did not have an email box. So I am aging myself here, but in my own career, watching this and having to balance it in my own life, and I do this, I really do. I block off, I've learned, and I've learned from others, I've said, because it's that Pavlovian thing. You get caught up in it. I've got to answer this right away. And oh my gosh, if I don't react right now, what are they going to think of me? And I think we all need to take a big, giant, deep breath and realize that most of us are not trauma surgeons. Most of us, it's not life-shattering if somebody gets an answer tomorrow. I mean, it's fine to acknowledge things, but this gets back to your own mental health and well-being. How do you work optimally? What coaching do you need to get you to that place? And what are the resources that either you're not tapping into in your organization or potentially could be put in place so that you can do that? And it's, again, I know I keep saying opportunity, but I truly believe that the businesses that take the time to do this right now, and trust me, I've talked to so many business leaders. Oh my God, we lost so much money. We've got to get back up and running. I just have to I just have to pay these bills. I understand that. but we don't want to be short-sighted. And I think that in the bigger picture of the world, we have to think both short and long term for every major decision that we're making right now. I truly believe it's going to determine whether we have a sustainable future. And economically in the United States, I mean, and I'm sure you guys have had people on that talked about this. One of the most concerning numbers to me is how much of the US GDP is getting eaten up by healthcare costs. Year over year, more and more and more. I mean, what, 30, 40 years ago, we were talking about 3%. Now we're closing in on 20. So where does that go for us as a nation? And where are the leaders, business leaders? And again, I'm not getting political. I'm just saying those are the numbers. Like, they're not lying. So how do we get creative and find ways to better attack that kind of cost? Because if we're building an economy where it is all about taking care of sick people, where does that lead us in terms of innovation 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road? If we don't truly look at the numbers around anxiety and depression for our young people, which has just gone up, like the data around this, these are our future workers. So I'd encourage, what's going on to these leaders out there, what's going on in your community? How can you get involved in these conversations? Because if we want a strong economy, we have to have a healthy workforce.
So let's talk about this. Are you talking about young people? Are you talking about high school age that are dealing with what high school kids go through? But it's really exacerbated today with everything so hyper.
Yes. And no, I think you bring up a really good point. And I think there's some days when I feel very great. Look, being a teenager, I don't care how old you were. I mean, all of us could probably look back and go, well, it's a pretty rough time as we were teenagers, or it was great, whatever it was. But the challenges for young people now, and again, I think when you think about, many of them have lived through both a financial crisis, so seeing their parents lose their jobs, their homes, like, that's very traumatizing for a child. They have lived through an era of always having breaking news every 3 seconds. That kind of stress level, not just in my home, but what's around me, and being in this sense of fear, unfortunately, I think has been exacerbated by social media. It doesn't mean I'm anti-social media. I'm not. It's about how we use these things. And now they've gone through COVID, and they might have lost grandparents, or they're seeing this other thing. And look, and then again, I don't want to be political, but at the same time, if you're a leader, how many of these young people were in the streets for different causes over the past 12 months? What is important to them? And they will shift some of this conversation because it has profoundly impacted their lives growing up. I do think that they're going to come with a very different voice. And so the leaders that are looking at this and preparing for this, or showing that, yes, we believe in getting involved in this. We are the company that you should come and work for because our values are the same as yours. Our focus.
Let's not make this political, but there's certainly applications to what exactly is going on in Washington and in a lot of state capitals right now, because of some people who are afraid of change, demographic change, number one. And it hasn't hit the workplaces yet, but certainly will. But it's impacting everything else. And the younger people who have been surveyed, if they're telling the truth anyway, following what Bernie Sanders was yapping about the past 5 years, okay, and it's turned out, hey, that makes sense now, considering COVID and all that. And so they're just not calling it what it used to be called. And those programs have saved the economy, I believe, saved the nation from catastrophic depression. But I don't know how much is too much, but who knows?
That's outside of my area of expertise, like in terms of what I tend to be, in general, in middle of the road. Here's the other thing I'm going to tell you about Global Women for Wellbeing. We have both very conservative and very liberal voices. We have people that come from all political backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and we purposely did this because we believe that pay equity and healthcare equity and leadership equity are human rights issues, not political issues. And here's an example of that. If somebody in your office gets cancer, God forbid, but they get cancer, is that a political issue about the treatment that they get? No, it doesn't matter whether you're a conservative Republican or a liberal Democrat. Everybody deserves good treatment, good health care, access to health care that helps all of us. And I even had a friend of mine from high school who is much more conservative than I am, and lovely person, very different viewpoints on certain things. But her daughter, when she was 7, was rushed to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so all of a sudden she started posting about, why do I have to pay twice as much for insulin in the United States than my friends in Canada? Why is that? Why do I have to spend more money for my child to be healthy? And that's a perfect example. Like, it's not political. It's about us having a quality of life and having access, because I hope after this pandemic that many more people understand that without your health, what do you have? You can't have relationships. What do you give up? What are you capable of doing? And we have to prioritize and protect our health and well-being so that we can be productive, so that we can innovate, so that we can have inclusive environments, so that we can do both intelligent, quick decision-making in a crisis, but also be able to hold on to the idea of, what is this going to mean 10 years out? And for any of you that might have seen the mini-series about Chernobyl, I can't,
No, I didn't see it.
again, it's not the easiest thing to watch, but there's a scene in it where they are in that room about 12 hours, I guess, or 24 hours before the whole thing blows up, basically. And it really gets to the point about what is leadership and where does it matter most? And how do we listen, truly listen? There were younger engineers and people that were raising giant red flags saying, I don't think this is right. Something's wrong here. And you had a more senior person, I've got to meet this deadline, just get it done. We have to get this finished. Think of the cost of that is the extreme example. But it's just such a great learning story, I think, for so many of us. It's easy to get caught up in crisis. And when you're a leader, oh my God, the buck stops with you. It's scary. And a lot of leaders are not allowed to show vulnerability. They don't feel like they can do that. I've had far too many back-end conversations over the past 18 months. And my heart goes out to every leader that has navigated through this, because God bless you. God bless you for keeping your companies running and getting us, through this, and keeping jobs for people. That is an extraordinary feat and probably something you were never trained to do. So, but it also opens up again this opportunity. And I would say start with yourself.
So leadership, we're talking about great leadership, of course, Stephen, but let's just for a second think about the tragedy in Surfside, Florida, whereby it was a known fact that building needed attention, but nobody knew how bad it was. Even the geniuses didn't know how bad it was. Nobody thought this would happen. But let's just say that there's different kind of leadership thinking, Stephen, at the top that included human right kind of thinking about the role of a lender, the role of the community, and the role of payback systems, insurance, the people who were ownership in that building, the condo ownership, they didn't want to spend $9 million. Where are they going to get that money? And who's going to lend it to them? And how's it ever going to get paid? But look at what the cost is going to be now in dollars, not just human life. My God. So wouldn't it have been better if some kind of innovative package could be put together, like a revenue bond that would take care of these issues and people don't go bankrupt getting involved in this? never mind lose their life.
I guess so. I mean, that would have been one. I guess this is also why you pay insurance in those situations as well. And I don't know what kind of insurance that the condominium had, but and even the constructor, the contractor, and where there be probably multiple contractors involved in the construction of that would have had liability insurance. But that's a problem in some ways. That would be the innovation. Liability insurance will take effect now, but liability insurance would not have maybe paid for the $9 million of repairs. And so maybe that's where the innovation package comes in, that kind of thinking. I don't know.
I'm also going to share with you, we interviewed a developer out of the Philippines, Emma Imperial. I highly recommend you go look up this woman, her and her company, and she's getting recognized for what she's doing. So the types of buildings that they're putting up are much more sustainable looking forward. Saltwater, hurricanes, all of these things. So this is the third piece in my mind of what you're bringing up. All right, this stuff doesn't work so well. We know the rebar, and I've listened to some of these guys, right? So what can we do going forward? What are the innovations that are out there that in these types of environments that actually work better, keep us healthier and safer? And so I think that's the third part of this conversation, because the other thing is, great, you're going to put all this insurance in place. Well, if more and more these buildings fail, what happens? The cost for the insurance goes up. Eventually, they don't underwrite anybody. And now nobody wins. So I think that, it's what do we do? That's the short term, long term, right? Here's the short term. What can we do around insurance and inspections and those things? But moving forward, building, renovating, what new materials, who's out there doing these things so that they are better. I remember Sandy, and again, I'm in the New York City area. So when Sandy hit and they showed the Jersey shoreline, I still have this visual image of them showing all these houses mowed down. And there was this rounded dome house that an architect had built. There it was, standing, no damage. And I'm like, well, look at that. Why are we building more? Because then the wind, there's not as much, like it just makes sense, right? It's up on stilts, the water goes underneath. It's, it's the way it, the forests and it's just, again, and I'm not an engineer, but I heard him talk a little bit and I was like, well, that makes so much sense to me. Why aren't we? So I think that, there's, again, I go back, opportunity. Where can companies like leaders, come in and do this? And again, please, I go back to, don't leave out all the diversity on the table, even through an ageism lens, because I often tell this story. This is a couple of years ago. I was traveling and I went to a hotel, very nice hotel, it was lovely and kind of funky and cool. And I get into the room and put my stuff away. And I look down and like everything, the card, the numbers on the phone, everything were probably 8 point. Yeah, you guys are going to laugh, right? The younger person, well, what's the problem with that? Right? Right. So am I going to spend my money in that hotel? Because what goes through my head? Oh my God, in the middle of the night, if I had to dial something, I can't even see this. Like, this is crazy. This isn't a good place for me. I don't even feel necessarily safe if I have to, deal with this. So I think that, and yet, who are the people that have money to spend on these things? So it's just an example of why you want to have innovation, AI innovation. We were talking to a female engineer out of Ireland, and she does a lot of medical, leads teams that comes up with all these really cool medical devices. And she said, look, it's not just about making sure that these medical machines, devices work for both male and female bodies. Physiologically, we're different. It's also about how they're designed for male and female doctors. Mm-hmm. So think about hand size and holding something, right? And so we all do better. We all stay healthier when we start to think about it through these lenses. I mean, again, I think the companies that start to really think outside the box and more along these lines, they're going to be the winners. Who doesn't want to be part of the best innovations out there? Who doesn't want to be part of creating a better world and having voice in that?
Well, we can go on forever, Stephen, here.
I think we could. This has been a fabulous. Our goal for these shows is to have an engaging conversation. I can't think of anything more engaging than what we've talked about. I'm going to throw one last concern at you, Mim, and that is
Bring it on.
I'm scared because you talked about the bending the benefits model, and particularly the example for it takes 6 years. Most CEOs don't last 6 years. So
Right.
how are we going to get businesses to think about this, and senior leaders particularly to think about this when it isn't in their best interest? They're going to be come and gone in 6 years.
Right. No, that's a really, really good point. And so I'd say for publicly traded companies, I think that when you can get board of directors to think about this, because if they're in it, or investors, if I'm investing in a company and I want to turn it around and I want to make some money down the road, we can get more creative around this piece. Now, I know that, and you may already know this, and I'm not sure if they've released it yet, but I know Bloomberg has been putting together indexes, just like there are those out there that they rate companies on environmental sustainability. They're starting to do that around diversity, inclusion, gender. So that's going to push the envelope, because there's a direct correlation to health and medical spend. It works all the way down through the company. So I think there, again, really cool opportunities to think about this. And you're right, it has to be more than the CEO. It has to be built into the culture, and understand the long-term benefit of doing this is hopefully going to mean this company is going to be around and providing jobs in my community for the next, 10, 15, 20 years. If you really are and look, let's be honest. I know plenty, unfortunately I do, because I worked on Wall Street. Well, burn and churn. We're going to do it. We're going to sell it. We're going to, and that's it. I'd ask you to consider where we are in the world. Is that really the future of leadership? Or is it time for us to start to have a different approach to how we create businesses, how we grow businesses, and really, what does it mean to put products and services into the marketplace? What does it mean for our children and our children's children? And I think that there is a shift in some sectors around this. And I encourage you to go out and read about those leaders that have gone out and done that, and think about what your legacy is going to be.
Mim, you're a global voice for change. And
change is good, not easy, but it's good if you do it the right way.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. It's been a great show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Signing off in San Diego, Stephen in Mexico City, and Mim in north of New York City. And producer Paul in Vegas, rolling the dice. There we go. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.